This happened last month. I wasn't sure what to think. I thought invoking whatever we did was just a joke. But now, things were spiraling. I may not have been the bravest person, but I knew this felt wrong. After the whisper, I rushed home. I couldn't shake that voice from my mind. It echoed as I walked, sticking with me even after I closed my front door. I locked it. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but I couldn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, thinking about the basement, the book, and the shadows I thought I saw. The next day at school felt different. Hallways were dimmer. I saw faces I recognized, but they all looked strange. When I met up with the others at art club again, everyone seemed on edge. We talked quietly, sharing what we had seen and felt. One girl, Jenna, said she kept hearing whispers near the lockers. Jake mentioned shadows darting just out of sight. "That's just us getting freaked out," I said, trying to sound brave. But inside, I was scared. As the weeks passed, I tried to ignore it. I attempted to draw, but all I could picture were dark places with crawling shadows. One evening, I worked late. The basement was empty and quiet. I was focused on my sketch, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked up and saw an outline of something, a shape just beyond my field of vision. My heart raced, and I felt my skin crawl. I called for Jenna. "Did you see that?" But the whispering shadow faded. No one answered. I was alone. The next day, I decided I had to confront this. I gathered the art club members, and we went back to the basement to find the book again. It took hours of search, but we finally found it, lurking in the shadows. Dust swirled in the air as we pulled it free. "Let's tear it up," I said. The others agreed. We gathered around, ripping pages and throwing them into a pile. As the last piece hit the ground, it felt like a weight lifted. We had to be safe now, right? But then the lights flickered, and a chill swept through the room. I looked at my friends. They looked just as scared as I felt. I heard whispers, urgent and chaotic, filling the basement. "You shouldn't have done that," they said. My breathing quickened. Something felt wrong. "It's just the wind," Jake said, but I shook my head. It wasn't the wind. We bolted out of the basement, hearts pounding. I turned back one last time. The pages twisted, swirling in a dark breeze that shouldn't be there. After that day, things didn't stop. The whispers followed me everywhere. I couldn't escape them. I thought about our ritual and my friends. Then, one morning, I was alone in the shower. The steam filled the room. "You can't run from us." I stumbled. I looked around, but there was nothing there. I felt dizzy. Every evening after, I heard the whispers talking, growing louder, calling me back. I don't know what we awakened down there. I don't think I want to know. All I know is that last month changed everything, and sometimes I can still hear them. I hadn't realized just how bad it had become until that Thursday. The whispers grew louder than ever, especially when I was alone. They were like a twisted song that wouldn't let go. I tried to focus on my homework, but every time I thought I heard something strike up, the words melted away, replaced by that unsettling chant. At lunch, I sat with Jenna and Jake. Their faces were pale and their eyes were sunken. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, but we were silent. I couldn't bring myself to say much. How could I? How could we pretend everything was normal when it felt like shadows were following us? "Have you all been hearing?" Jenna started, but Jake cut her off. "Do you think we really unleashed something? Like something evil?" He sounded terrified. I could see his fingers trembling on the table. Jenna glanced around nervously. "We should talk to Mrs. Hayes. Maybe she knows what to do." I felt a pit grow in my stomach. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run. What if she doesn't believe us? "That's not the point," Jenna shot back. "We can't just ignore this." I agreed to go, but dread weighed heavily on me. The moment we stepped into Mrs. Hayes's art room, the air changed. It felt thicker, heavy with something I couldn't name. Mrs. Hayes was kind, with her gentle demeanor and warm smile. She looked up, clearly surprised to see us. "What brings you three here?" Jake hesitated. We need to talk about something important. It's about the basement." Her expression shifted. For a heartbeat, she looked less like our teacher and more like someone facing an unseen terror. Then she composed herself. "Go on." We told her everything, about the book, the whispers, and the shadows. I watched her closely, looking for a flicker of disbelief. But she nodded slowly, her eyes growing serious. "I'm not surprised," she said. "It's an old building. Sometimes those places hold on to memories. Or worse." "What do you mean by worse?" Jenna asked, her voice a whisper. Mrs. Hayes sighed. "There are stories about what happens when boundaries are crossed. You shouldn't have disturbed that book. It could have had lingering effects." My heart raced. "What do we do?" "I have some old records of rituals," she said, her voice low. "But I need to warn you, those things are unpredictable. It's not just about what you awakened. It's about what knows you're here." Just then, the lights flickered. The room felt colder. I glanced back at the door, half expecting to see something lurking behind it. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated from the hallway. The three of us jumped. Mrs. Hayes rushed to the door, and we followed her, fear pushing us faster. When we stepped into the hallway, it was dark. Shadows pooled in the corners. Then I saw it, a figure moving just at the edge of the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. "That's when I saw it," I whispered. Something was coming for us. Everything in me screamed to run, but I stood frozen. It didn't feel like we could escape this time. The figure loomed in the doorway, a silhouette darker than the shadows surrounding it. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It moved slowly, almost like it was studying us. My heart hammered in my chest as a feeling of dread washed over me. "Get back!" Mrs. Hayes shouted, pushing Jake and Jenna behind her. I wanted to move, to do anything but stand there, but my legs betrayed me. The whispers escalated in my ears, drowning out reality. They were loud, urgent, pulling me into a chaotic haze. All I could think about was how we'd made a mistake, a grave one. "Guys, we need to leave," Jenna pleaded, her face pale. But Mrs. Hayes didn't budge. "You need to stay calm. We can't provoke it." Provoke it? My mind raced. What was she talking about? It felt like everything around us leaned closer, as if the very walls were eavesdropping on our fear. "Let's back away slowly," Mrs. Hayes said, her voice steady. We did as she instructed, inching back towards the art room. The figure didn't follow, but it watched us. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hallway. My stomach sank. "What was that?" Jake whispered, his voice shaking. "Something else," Mrs. Hayes whispered, fear etched on her face. "We should keep moving." As we retreated, I scanned the hallway. The shadows felt alive, stretching and warping like fingers reaching out to pull us back. I wanted to scream, to bolt, but I couldn't shake the chilling realization that this might be it, that whatever was happening was just beginning. We stepped into the art room, and Mrs. Hayes slammed the door behind us. She turned the lock with a tremor in her hands. "We need to find the records. We must do the ritual before it's too late." "Ritual? What will that even do?" I asked, clenching my fists. The fear that had taken root was now like fire in my veins. How could we possibly fix this? "It may help us restore the balance," she replied, her eyes darting to the shadows outside the door. "Do you think it will work?" Jenna asked, desperation leaking into her voice. Mrs. Hayes hesitated. "There are no guarantees." A cold wind swept through the room, bringing with it "They're coming," it seemed to say. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and for a terrifying moment the air felt static, heavy. I felt it then, the certainty that we were running out of time. The whispers were louder than ever now, a cacophony of despair. "Let's start," Mrs. Hayes commanded, pulling open a drawer filled with old books and crumpled papers. I could hardly focus on what was in front of me. The sensation of being watched was unbearable. I had to know what awaited us outside that door. I crept over, pressing my ear against the wood. What I heard made my blood run cold. A voice whispered my name, soft but filled with malice. It knew I was there. That was when the shadows began to writhe, twisting into forms right outside the door. And just like that, I realized we had invited something far worse into our lives. I could barely hear the rustling of papers as Mrs. Hayes frantically searched through the drawer. The panic hung thick in the air, mingling with the whispers thrumming against my skull. I pressed harder against the door, straining to catch even a hint of what lay beyond. "Just focus," Mrs. Hayes said, and I could see her resolve fraying at the edges. "We need to find the inscription." "What inscription?" Jake asked, his voice quaking. She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the numerous books piled on the counter. "Wait here." "Are you crazy?" Jenna interjected, a glimmer of defiance lacing her fear. "We should all stick together." Mrs. Hayes glanced back at the door, then at us. "If we don't do this now, it could be too late." The urgency in her voice was chilling. I didn't want to linger, but the thought of something waiting for us outside was worse. I felt trapped. Suddenly, there was another crash from the hallway, louder this time. The floor shook and the door rattled against the frame. I jumped back, breathing fast. "What was that?" I gasped, my heart racing. "Stay quiet," Mrs. Hayes hissed, her eyes locked on the door. Time stretched as we waited, the moments dragging painfully. The shadows outside danced, flickering unnaturally in the dim light. I could almost see them forming into shapes, twitching and bending as if they were alive. "Did you find anything?" I dared to whisper, hoping to distract myself from the noise outside. Mrs. Hayes straightened, a yellowed paper clutched in her hand. "I found it," she said, the triumph in her voice a stark contrast to the panic swirling around us. "What does it say?" Jenna looked at her, eyes wide with a mix of hope and terror. "It's a guide for the ritual," Mrs. Hayes replied, scanning the text. "We'll need the salt from the supply closet and candles from the storeroom." Before I could respond, the whispers returned, louder now, almost pleading. "It's hungry," they seemed to chant. "Can't you hear that?" "We need to move," I urged. "Just a moment," Mrs. Hayes insisted. "I can't risk it if we're not prepared." The door shook again, more violently, as if something was trying to claw its way through. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. "It's coming! We have to do something!" Okay, get the salt and candles," she said urgently, her voice sharper now. "Jake, stay with me." I pounded out of the art room, my heart racing. I dashed down the darkened hallway, shadows threatening to swallow me whole. Which way was the supply closet? I turned right and then left, my mind racing. That's when I saw it. A figure loomed at the end of the hallway, darker than anything I had ever seen. My legs went weak, and I was rooted to the spot. The whispers grew louder, drowning out all rational thought. Before I could scream, it moved. Swiftly, silently, it lunged towards me. And just like that, everything went dark. When I came to, I was sprawled on the cold, tiled floor of the supply closet. The smell of dust and mildew filled my nostrils. It felt wrong, too dark, too quiet. I blinked, trying to shake off the heaviness in my limbs. My heart raced as the events flooded back. The darkness, the figure. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice fragile in the emptiness. No response. A sickening knot twisted in my stomach. I pulled myself up, bracing against the wall. The closet was cramped, shelves lined with cleaning supplies and boxes of forgotten projects. I had to get back to the others. I stumbled to the door, yanking it open. I was met with the faint flicker of lights. As I stepped out, the hallway was devoid of life. A thick silence wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating. Where was everyone? I took a tentative step forward, adrenaline driving me to push aside the gnawing fear. "Mrs. Hayes? Jake? Jenna?" I called, my voice echoing. No answer. A sickening knot twisted in my stomach. I pulled myself up, bracing against the wall. The closet was cramped, shelves lined with cleaning supplies and boxes of forgotten projects. I had to get back to the others. I stumbled to the door, yanking it open. I was met with the faint flicker of lights. As I stepped out, the hallway was devoid of life. A thick silence wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating. Where was everyone? I took a tentative step forward, adrenaline driving me to push aside the gnawing fear. "Mrs. Hayes, Jake, Jenna," I called, my voice echoing. No answer. I ran a hand through my hair, frantically reminding myself to stay calm. I could hear whispers in the back of my mind, haunting melodies playing like an old record. "It's hungry," they droned again, wrapping around me like a shroud. I took off down the hallway, desperate to find them, but the shadows warped as the dim light flickered. Fear gripped me with every step. I turned a corner and stopped dead. In the center of the art room, candles flickered feebly on a table, forming an odd halo. The salt was strewn across the floor in a strange pattern. In the center of the design sat the yellowed paper Mrs. Hayes had found. But where were they? Feeling a pull toward the table, I edged closer. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I snatched the paper and scanned it. It depicted symbols I didn't recognize. The instructions seemed to tell a story, but one that twisted in ways I couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, the whispers surged.
"It's here!" they echoed. I looked around frantically. The shadows darkened, transforming into a grotesque mass. Then I heard footsteps approaching. They were heavy, deliberate. A chill slithered down my spine. I searched for a place to hide, but the room felt increasingly claustrophobic. My heart pounded as I dove behind a pile of canvases. The darkness loomed closer, a silhouette edging to where the candles flickered. "Is anyone there?" A voice broke the heavy silence. It was Mrs. Hayes. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Shadows crept around her, threatening to consume her with each step. "Get away from there!" I hissed, my voice trembling. "It's not safe!" She turned, eyes wide. "Quick, we need to complete the ritual!" But the shadows writhed, almost as if they were alive, reaching out. Panic surged through me. I wouldn't let it take any of us. I grabbed the paper and yelled, "What do we do?" But before she could answer, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles in an instant. In darkness, I could feel its presence, and I knew we weren't alone. A sense of dread clawed at my throat. We had invoked something strange, and it was hungry. The darkness swallowed everything. My heart hammered in my chest as I fumbled around, trying to find Mrs. Hayes. I couldn't see her. My fingers brushed against the rough surface of the table, and I gripped tightly, panicked. "Mrs. Hayes?" I whispered, hoping for an answer. Nothing but silence. The whispers swelled, intermingling with the rushing sound of my own heartbeat. "It's coming," they warned. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the noise, the fear, but the sound only grew louder. "Stay close!" A voice pierced through the darkness, and I spun around. It was Jenna, her figure barely visible. Relief washed over me. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she replied, her breath shaky. "I just wanted to see if everyone was okay. They all vanished." Panic clawed at my throat again. "We need to find Jake and Mrs. Hayes. They can't be far." We stumbled toward the door, but before we could take another step, a cold breeze swept through the room, sending shivers down my spine. The candles reignited with an eerie glow, flickering like dying fireflies. My gaze darted back to the table. The salt pattern was still there, disturbingly intact. But now something moved within the design. A shadow slithered, curling and twisting, almost as if it had a life of its own. I felt a pull toward it, as if it wanted to drag me in. "Don't look at it!" Jenna yelled, breaking my trance. I tore my gaze away, trembling. "What do we do?" "Maybe the paper?" she suggested. I yanked it from my pocket and unfolded it again. "We need to figure out those symbols." Just then, the door slammed shut, reverberating through the...
We exchanged terrified looks. "We have to complete whatever ritual that is," I said, my voice steady now. "It's the only way to fight this thing." Jenna nodded, apprehension mingling with determination. "Okay, let's just hope it's not too late." I tucked the paper under my arm, and we edged closer to the table. In the candlelight, the symbols began to shimmer. I traced my finger over one of the designs, feeling a faint warmth. "This one looks different," I murmured. "What if it activates something?" Jenna suggested hesitantly. "Maybe that's what we need. We've come too far to stop now." Before I could react, a low growl rumbled in the shadows, vibrating through the floor. My stomach dropped. Something was awakening. "Let's do it," I said quickly. I pointed to the symbols on the paper, and we quickly moved to scratch them in the salt. As we finished, the room shuddered. The growl turned into a roaring scream, filling the space with darkness. I felt the ground shake beneath me, and suddenly, everything went dark again. I couldn't breathe. The shadows were everywhere, pressing, suffocating. Then, something cold brushed against my skin. I froze, my mind screaming that we had to keep going, but terror anchored me. And then, through the chaos, I heard a voice, deep and resonant. "You have summoned me." That's when I realized. The shadows weren't just an environment. They were alive, and they were hungry for more than just fear. I was paralyzed with fear, caught between the chilling voice and the suffocating darkness. Something stirred within the shadows, and the shadows themselves seemed to pulse with a bizarre, otherworldly energy. "Jenna!" I gasped, my voice barely making it past my throat. "Right here!" Her voice was shaky, but she was still close. "I don't think this is just a simple ritual," I said, backing away from the table, where the now shimmering symbols seemed to come alive. "We need to figure out what we've done." The low growl returned, rumbling through the floor and sending vibrations up my legs. Instinctively, I reached for Jenna, gripping her arm tight. "We have to." Before I could finish, something burst from the shadows. A figure, tall and twisted, loomed just beyond the light of the candles. The features were indistinct, like a painting left to fade in the sun, but I could feel its eyes boring into me. "Run!" Jenna shouted, and we turned, scrambling toward the door. But it was still closed, sealed by a force I couldn't begin to understand. "Help!" I cried out, my fingers fumbling against the hard surface of the door. It wouldn't budge, no matter how hard I pushed. "Over here!" Jenna pointed to the window on the far side of the room. It was dark outside, but the thought of escape fueled my adrenaline. We raced toward it, hearts pounding against our chests. As we ran, the figure changed, shifting and growing darker, a void in the light. Whispers filled my ears again, louder and more insistent. "You will not leave." I reached the window first, frantically trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge either.
"Come on!" I shouted, panic rising. "Get back!" Jenna yelled, just as the figure lunged at us. It billowed, expanding like smoke, filling the room with its chilling presence. In that moment of impending doom, I remembered the paper. "The symbols, Jenna! We have to draw more!" "What?" she yelled, urgency in her voice. "Just trust me." I dug through my pocket, pulling out a pen. With shaking hands, I turned back to the salt-covered table and began to scratch at the symbols. "Help me!" I called out again. Jenna joined me, her eyes never leaving the dark figure. We frantically traced the lines of the symbols, hoping for something, anything to change. The air thickened as I completed the last symbol. An electric pulse surged through the room. The growl turned into a deafening roar, but I pressed on. "Focus!" I yelled over the noise. "We need to finish it." Just as we completed the final stroke, the figure stopped advancing. It hovered, its form shifting uncertainly. "That's when I saw it," Jenna said, pointing with wide eyes. There, in front of the table, a crack opened in the shadows. Inside the crack was a blinding light, pulling the dark figure toward it. It screamed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "We need to get to that light," I shouted, but the crack was closing fast. Jenna grabbed my hand, and together we sprinted toward it. The darkness clawed at us, but we didn't stop. One last leap, and I felt us break through. And then, just like that, we were free. The darkness faded, but the memory of what we had unleashed lingered. "We need to tell everyone," I gasped as I caught my breath. "We can't let this happen again." But before Jenna could respond, something shifted behind me, and I knew we weren't safe yet. We had awakened something that night, and it wasn't done with us yet. The first rays of dawn crept through the leaves, casting a hesitant light on the chaos we had escaped. I was shaken, still trying to make sense of everything that happened. I glanced at Jenna. Her face was pale, eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here." As we walked away from the school, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting the dark figure to lunge at us once more. The streets felt eerily quiet. The world looked the same, but inside, everything felt different. "We should meet with Jason," I said suddenly, remembering he was into this kind of stuff. "He can help us figure it out." Jenna nodded reluctantly. "All right, but if he tries to summon anything again, we can't."
Let him. We made our way to Jason's house, a small two-story brick building at the end of the block. My heart raced with each step, a mix of dread and hope fueling my legs. As we approached, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. "Jason?" I called out, stepping cautiously over the threshold. The interior was dark and oddly quiet. "Are you in here?" No answer, just the echoes of our own voices. Jenna looked uneasy. "Should we go inside? We can't just leave. He might need help." I pushed the door open wider, and it creaked loudly. The living room looked normal. Couches, a TV, the usual. But the air felt heavy, charged with something unsettling. "Maybe he's in his room," Jenna suggested, glancing at the stairs. I nodded, and we made our way up, trying to ignore the growing unease bubbling in my stomach. Each step creaked beneath our weight. "Jason!" I called again, louder this time. I reached the top of the landing and hesitated. His door was shut, but there was a faint light creeping from underneath. As I pressed my ear against the door, I heard muffled voices coming from inside. I exchanged a glance with Jenna. She looked just as confused and scared as I felt. "Should we knock?" Jenna asked. Before I could respond, the door swung open. Jason stood there, his eyes wide and wild. "You're back, thank God. Are you okay? We need to talk," I stammered, glancing past him into the room. It looked like a scene from one of those old horror movies. Books and papers were strewn everywhere, and there were strange symbols drawn all over the walls, some of them eerily similar to the ones we'd seen before. About what? Jason asked, stepping aside to let us in. It's a good thing you came. I've been trying to figure out what we unleashed. Are you serious? Jenna asked, looking horrified. What are all those symbols? I found more, Jason said, excitement bubbling in his voice. But I realized something. I need your help to complete this. Complete what? Alarm bells rang in my head. My instincts told me to run. Let's just say, he replied, grinning maniacally, I think we can contain it, or maybe even control it. Before any of us could react, a loud crash echoed upstairs. We froze, hearts pounding. Then a low growl reverberated through the walls, chilling us to the bone. They're here, I whispered, my heart racing. Who's here? Jenna breathed, her eyes wide. Whatever we unleashed, it's not just me who's been affected. It wants to come back. I felt the chill creeping over me again as I realized we were far from safe. And then, from the shadows of the corner, something shifted. The last thing I saw was a dark shape emerging from the darkness, and this time, we weren't prepared. The dark shape lunged forward, and everything happened in a blur. My first instinct was to
shove Jenna behind me. I didn't even know what I was protecting her from, but the primal urge to shield her took over. Jason stepped back, fear flickering across his face. What is it? He stammered, voice shaky. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare as the creature emerged from the shadows. It wasn't human, not really. Its limbs were long and gangly, almost distorted. Its skin was a sickly shade, and its claws glinted in the dim light. Rage and confusion twisted in my gut. "Get back!" I yelled, hoping my voice would command some sort of authority. Jenna clutched my arm, trembling. The thing let out a guttural growl, echoing like a taunt. I was rooted in place, unable to take my eyes off it. I wasn't about to let it get close, but I couldn't tell if it was looking for a fight, or something else, a darker purpose. "Jason!" I shouted, snapping him out of his stupor. "Do something!" "But he started, but before he could finish, the creature darted forward. The air turned thick with tension as I instinctively pushed Jenna aside, trying to create a barrier between her and the looming threat. Jason's eyes widened. "I can't summon anything to help us, not after what happened." His voice cracked, filled with panic. The creature paused, as if sensing our fear, and then lunged toward Jason. Instinct kicked in, and I lunged after it, trying to grab hold of Jason to pull him out of the way. But the thing was faster. It lunged, talons aimed straight for Jason's throat. "No!" I screamed, desperation clawing at me. Just as it was about to strike, the creature hesitated, as if confused by an invisible barrier. I froze, feeling a strange shift in the air. Somehow, it stopped mere inches from Jason, growling in frustration. "This shouldn't be happening! Not now!" Jason cried out, stumbling back against the wall. What was keeping it at bay? I shot a glance at the symbols drawn all over the walls. They glowed faintly, reacting to the creature's presence. Jason must have been trying to keep it contained all along. But how? "Those symbols!" Jenna shouted, pointing. "They're stopping it!" "I don't know how to control it. I didn't think it would actually show up," Jason said desperately. I searched my mind for a plan. "Can you add more to the symbols? Can we trap it again?" "Maybe, but I need time." His voice trembled. The creature, sensing our hesitation, pulled back, pacing like a predator waiting for the right moment. It lowered its stance, growling low and menacing, eyes locking onto mine. I gulped, feeling the weight of its gaze. What if it didn't need to strike? What if it just wanted freedom? "Jason, now!" I urged, my heart racing. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and everything went dark. I felt Jenna's hand slip out of my grip. Panic surged through me. "Jenna," I called, desperately feeling for her in the pitch black. "Right here," she replied, her voice quivering. Then, like a crack of thunder, the lights surged back on. We froze. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing where Jenna had just been. The creature wasn't the only thing here anymore. My heart sank. Whatever Jason had summoned, there was no way to contain it now. I stood frozen at the sight. The familiarity of fear washed over me again, its icy grip tightening around my throat. Jenna's terrified voice pulled me back. She was beside me again, but the figure loomed close, a dark shape waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Run!" I hollered, grabbing Jenna's arm. I didn't know where we were going, but we had to escape this twisted reality. We barreled past Jason, who seemed paralyzed by both fear and disbelief, his eyes darting between us and the grotesque thing that stood between him and the door. "Come on!" I shouted, adrenaline fueling my legs as we surged toward the exit. But as we moved, the lights flickered again, casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. In that strobe of dim light and darkness, I caught glimpses of faces, pale and contorted. Were these remnants of those who had come before? My heart sank further. Yet I couldn't afford to dwell on that right now. Our only focus should be escape. We reached the door, and I yanked it open, pulling Jenna through before Jason could even think to follow. I heard him shout, "Don't leave me!" But I couldn't risk turning back. The echoing growl from behind chilled me to my bones. We raced down the staircase and pushed through the front door, stumbling into the cool evening air. My lungs filled with relief, but it was short-lived. I glanced back, half expecting the creature to be right behind us. The facade of normalcy had shattered the moment we stepped into Jason's world. We weren't out of danger yet. "Where do we go?" Jenna gasped, scanning our surroundings. The streets were empty, bathed in the fading light. Anxiety clawed at my insides as I searched for an answer. "We need to find somewhere safe," I managed to say. "Somewhere we can think." "Like the library?" Jenna suggested hesitantly, her eyes darting down the block. The library was still open. It felt like a fortress compared to everything else. "Yeah, the library," I nodded, even though uncertainty crept in. What would we do if the thing followed us? We both hesitated, peering back at Jason's house, where darkness hung thick against the windows, hiding secrets we were not meant to know. As we skirted around the corner, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the very shadows were alive, bending to our fears, waiting for an opportune moment to strike. Every whisper in the wind felt tainted, every flicker of light a reminder of the deeper, lurking dread we couldn't shake off. "Do you think it can find us?" Jenna.
"I don't know," I whispered, quickening my pace. We reached the library entrance just as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon. My heart raced as I pushed the door open, dragging Jenna inside. Once inside, we collapsed against the shelves lined with books, breathing heavily. The air smelled of aged paper and ink, a comforting but deceptive scent that hardly masked the horror we had just escaped. "What do we do now?" Jenna said, glancing around anxiously. I shook my head. "First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." "Do you think the library has any books on rituals? Or, I don't know, anything similar?" Jenna asked, her eyes brightening with a spark of desperation. "Maybe," I replied, already moving deeper into the stacks, scanning titles as I went. The shadows shifted ominously, stretching across the wooden floors like tendrils grasping at our fears. I grabbed a book that looked promising and flipped through the pages. It was filled with drawings of intricate symbols, some eerily similar to those Jason had scrawled in his room. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the library entrance. We both whirled around, hearts thumping wildly. The door slammed shut, the echoes of a growl reverberating through the tense silence. "It's here," I whispered, dread filling my lungs. Can we use the book? Maybe it'll tell us how to protect ourselves." Jenna's voice trembled, but a flicker of determination ignited in her eyes. "Let's hope so," I said, clutching the book to my chest. I flipped the pages frantically, searching for answers, while Jenna watched the entrance warily. The shadows leaned closer, drawn by the weight of our fear. But as I read, I realized something even more unsettling. There was no clear way to confront whatever darkness we had invoked. The symbols I saw were a mix of binding and banishing, each marking a thin line between what could be controlled and what couldn't. An overwhelming sense of despair settled in. "What if we can't stop it?" I voiced, my throat dry. "The important part is knowing that we have to try," Jenna replied, inching toward the entrance. Before I could stop her, she called out, "If you're here, show yourself!" I gasped, the stupidity of her challenge reverberating through the quiet library. Shadows danced erratically, and a bone-chilling laugh echoed back, delighting in our dread. And then it came, coalescing from the darkness into a swirling mass, an entity that seemed to embody all our worst fears. "Welcome back," it hissed, the voice like ice slicing through my heart. "You thought you could run?" My mind spun, fear and adrenaline merging into a potent cocktail. We didn't mean to," I stuttered. The creature's laughter echoed mockingly. "Meaning matters little. Now you will pay the price for your curiosity." It lunged towards us, a swirling vortex of shadow, and instincts kicked in. "Jenna, we need to do something now." "Look for the symbols in the book," she urged, scrambling alongside me. "If we can summon a counterspell—" Before she could finish, the creature swiped at us, a gust of cold wind uprooting books from the shelves. "You are mine," it boomed, filling the space with palpable darkness. We stumbled back, dodging the onslaught of flying books and papers. In that moment, I felt the weight of what was at stake. We couldn't just run anymore. I had to confront this. "Focus," I shouted at Jenna. "We have to finish what we started. The symbols could be the key." The dark figure loomed closer, but I gathered my thoughts, looking desperately for anything that resembled a plan. The library's new shadows closed in, and I shouted the first binding symbols I could recall. Light flickered from the book as I wove the words together, trying to hold the darkness at bay. The creature paused, its form wavering. "You think you can contain me?" "Yes," I yelled back, fiercer than I felt. "We can find a way." Jenna joined in, the new symbology interlacing with mine, and for a moment it felt like it was working. The shadows were pushed back, thin strands of light flickered around us. But the darkness roared, consuming branches of light one by one. "Keep going," Jenna urged through gritted teeth, never breaking focus. A dark laugh reverberated through the room, and with a surge of energy, the creature lunged forward again, clawing toward us as if to rip apart the very fabric we were trying to create. "More! We need more!" I shouted, desperate. Jenna called out, "There! Draw that one!" I sketched furiously in the air, tracing out the symbols that glimmered in the book, each stroke a tiny spark against the overwhelming darkness. "Almost! There!" she encouraged, while the darkness hissed, envious and furious. We were almost close. I could feel the pressure building, the intensity shifting. The shadows writhed, warping into grotesque shapes as their hold on this domain slipped. With one final flourish, the last symbol fell into place, and the light surged, flooding the library with blinding brightness. The thing recoiled, its howls of fury echoing through the vastness. "This is not the end." In a dizzying flash, the light pushed back, shoving the shadows away like a receding tide. And then the darkness fell silent, dragged back into the corners from whence it came. The library felt emptier, yet somehow saturated with the remnants of what had just breached its walls.
As we stood there, breathless and shaking, I exchanged a glance with Jenna. Did we do it? I think so, she breathed, her cheeks flushed with relief. Yet even as we bolstered each other with warmth, that shadow of doubt lingered. But what about what it said? I whispered. And just then a whisper floated through the air, haunting and low, leaving us with unanswered questions in the stillness of the library. Just remember, this is far
from over. Even as the creature's presence receded, uncertainty continued to coil within me, as if a worry was festering, hovering far beyond our control. I knew we had survived, but survival wouldn't be enough. Questions remained, shadows lingered, and some darkness could never truly be contained.